sit down. I'll let you sit down first. Yeah. Welcome to the Planning Commission. The date is Monday, February 24th. Will everyone please rise for a Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. First item of tonight's agenda is the actual approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments or concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Moving on, we have the approval of the minutes for the February 10th, 2014 meeting. Did anyone have any changes that they would like to make? Okay. Not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion for that as well.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2014 meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
You abstain? You okay, Julie? Great. First item of public hearing is variance 2013-10. The location is 6640 Shady Oak Road, Eden Prairie. The request is to permit a 176-foot building identification wall sign on the north elevation, to permit a 176-foot building identification wall sign on the south elevation, and to permit a 50-foot square foot identification wall sign on the east elevation. City code permits one building identification wall sign per wall per street frontage, not to exceed 50 square feet. With that being said, Mr. Franz, I also understand that there is a meeting note on here to continue it to the March 10th, 2014 meeting. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not, other than we have a letter from CORE Commercial Real Estate Group requesting the continuance. And we are having our meeting tomorrow with the three parties to talk about sign options, so hopefully we'll come back with a solution that all of us will be happy with at the March 10th meeting.
Okay, perfect. So with that being said,
I'll make a motion to continue for continuance to the March 10th commission meeting.
thank you very much. We have a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Moving on, we will continue that meeting then on March 10th, 2014. Next item in the public hearing is the Eden Prairie Community Center Aquatic Addition. The location is 16700 Valley View Road. The request is a site plan review on 103 acres, a height variance from 30 feet to 35 feet, and the side yard setback variance from 50 feet to 30 feet. And with that being said, I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead. We'll have the proponent from Eden Prairie speak.
Yes, Commission members, Jay Latimer, Parks and Recreation Director. I'll try not to take up too much of your time tonight, but since this is a city project, I wanted to give you a little more detail about the project in general, and then certainly be willing to entertain any questions. So,
thanks, Jay.
We are zoomed in here on the document camera, and I'll try to orientate you. For those of you who are familiar with the current facility, this area are the two racquetball courts. This is a gymnasium. Over here is kind of the main entrance. If you go all the way over, that's where the ice arena entrances are. So what we're proposing is flipping basically where the ice arena entrances are to the south side, and you would enter the aquatics addition. And this is the first floor floor plan, and the next slide I'll show you is actually the second floor, where we're able to do a little bit of expansion on top of the first floor. So you enter in, and you can then take a left down this hallway. There's a public meeting room that, when there are swim meets, would also be the judges area to be able to analyze scores and things, as well as the meet organizers. But it's also mainly going to function as a community meeting room. Pair of restrooms, and then what we're calling a dry land training. As we showed the council in our feasibility study, right now the swimmers are actually doing some of their dry land training in hallways, so really tight circumstances, and really no ability to use weights or resistance. So that's what this would be outfitted with. This is a row of bleachers, several rows, up to 300 people able to sit in these bleachers. They actually go up 2 floors. You're looking at 2 pools, one being an 8-lane competition pool. This is where the starting blocks are. This is the coldest water that we would have in the facility. It would make me shiver just being in it. But those who are really intense swimmers will love this nice cold water. This then is an 8-lane, same size as this, but a little bit warmer water, and you'll see a deeper end, 2 diving boards, a climbing wall. This is more appropriate for people who aren't as high level of lap swimmers or training for swimming, but may just want to have more casual lap swimming and exercising, as well as diving. The climbing wall, the deep water allows for some deep water exercise. The shallower water at this end allows for those 7, 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old swimmers to advance their swimming skills. We're looking at this as a phase 1, phase 2 project, but bidding it all at the same time. And so this is all, as you go by the community center, it's just empty land right out here. And so we would do this part in phase 1. It also has a lobby area back in here. It has what we call wet locker rooms. So you see a lot of tile in those and not any carpet. And it's really designed for just swimmers. So that's the main part of what is phase 1 in the lower level. Phase 2, I'll kind of show you where our current pool is right in here. Once phase 1 is up, that allows us to move on to phase 2. And this is our warmest water, and I'll show you some better renderings and photos in just a second. But this is a zero depth entry. It also has a classroom that will help for some birthday parties or meetings, has some play equipment in it, goes down into where this could also be lap swimming, but this is a really warm water pool and really family oriented and learn to swim oriented. Water slide, 2 stories, where you enter into a pool as you go to the bottom of the slide, and then also a hot tub jacuzzi scenario. So those are kind of the main features of, the first floor and the aquatics piece. What it does allow us to do on the upper level, building over top of the entryway, is to expand our fitness area, add an elevator for both accessibility but also for safety purposes, add a restroom on the upper floor, and reconfigure the fitness studios and add an additional fitness studio to better serve the fitness activities that are happening. There's over 100 fitness classes a week, group fitness classes a week at the community center right now. And if you're there at 6:45 in the morning or 6:45 at night, every one of the current treadmills and ellipticals are being used. So these yellow squares represent about 20 more pieces of fitness equipment that would be able to be offered with this renovation. Get a little more storage out of it, but that's essentially the second story addition to the fitness area. This then, I'll orientate you back. Right in here are the bleachers. So you're looking across the 2 colder, more competitive pools. These are windows looking out at Valley View. This is the 8-lane competitive pool with starting blocks. You see the diving boards down here, climbing wall. Eventually, this is the area that goes through to the second pool or the recreation pool. You come out of the locker rooms on this side. Back behind the bleachers is where the entrance is back here, and then also the dryland training is kind of over in this area. The bathrooms that I showed you, and then also back into this area is where the meeting room is, just off the lobby. Up above here, down in this area, you're actually looking out of that group fitness studio onto this body of water. Back here, out of these windows, you're actually potentially on a treadmill or an elliptical, looking into the water here. This is just a few examples. This isn't going to be the configuration of the play equipment that would be here. That would mostly be moved over to this side of the pool. But as you can see, this is a zero depth. So you walk straight in from the tile right into the water. And then as you follow this around, that goes through that into that bigger square area. That's a little more of a, probably about a 20-yard potential for lap swimming in a very warm water environment. So this might be where we have some of our senior or also our rehab exercise classes in a good warm environment. Also, it's where some of the youngest kids' swimming lessons would take place. And then, as you can see, it's a fun place for a family to go with younger kids and be able to be in water that's accessible to kids that aren't able to swim. A couple of other slides that I'll show you. Some current exterior elevations that you're looking at. This is where you enter. Right around this corner is the current main entrance of the community center. This right now is that big block brick wall of the racquetball courts gymnasium. So we're showing some more planting there. Again, you enter here, go down the main spine of the hallway. You're seeing these windows are the the small meeting room. This is more of the panels where the restrooms would be. This is the dry land training. And then this is going, again, a long valley view where the windows go into the pool area. This view is actually if you were coming from the high school, heading this way. You know, right now, again, all of this is kind of an open area. It's where the wading pool used to be, but that got filled in with some concrete. Really just a couple trees there now, so we're suggesting we would add in trees and make this a little more of a architecturally attractive building as you're coming down Valley View Road. So with that, I know tonight you're looking at the variance with the setback as well as the height. I'm just going to give you a little bit of perspective on where some of those property lines are. As you head back towards the high school, this darker green represents a storm pond, so we're quite a ways away from any other buildings. We are looking at one of the higher walls is this water slide structure. That's in phase 2 at best. We're looking at having that as an alternate, and it's also being designed where if costs come back as too high, where we would be able to just leave that off from the project. Hopefully all things work out, but that's one of the larger cost items that would be put into an alternate, and the council would have a decision to make if that's warranted to stay in the project. So with that, I'd certainly answer any questions or if you have other thoughts.
Thank you very much. Mr. Franzen, do you have anything to add at this time?
Only that the staff recommends approval of the site plan review on 103 acres and approval of final order 2014-02.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing how this is a public hearing, is there anyone out in the audience that has any comments or concerns about this project? Yes, so now would be the time. Not seeing any commissioners. Do you have any comments or questions?
I have a question. Mr. Franzen, I don't see parking mentioned in here. Is the existing parking sufficient for this expansion? Is there any issues around that?
Maybe there's a two-part answer. There's the park and rec, maybe scheduling point of view relative to parking, and then there's the city code relative to parking. Based upon the use of the building, the amount of parking that they have is adequate according to city code.
I'll give you the second part to that. So we have a couple of opportunities, and we want to look at that as we keep moving forward. But behind the community center, which sometimes looks like it belongs to the community center, it's actually a school parking lot. So during the day, it belongs to the high school, and the priority is for all of their teachers to be able to park there. It's roughly about 70 spots and is not yet been well discovered. And there's two ways that we plan to approach that, because after 3 o'clock, which is some of our busiest times, and also on the weekend, we have access to that by agreement with the high school. And so a couple of ways that we can work with that. We have at times in the wintertime, we have 50 staff employed at the community center at any given time. And so most of them are driving separately. A few of them might get dropped off by parents, some of the younger workers, but most of them are coming in almost 50 separate cars. And so we have the ability to train them, to require them to park in certain areas. So we believe that the cars that have been our staff that have been in the main parking areas, we're able to move them back just from a scheduling standpoint. We also have room, it's kind of known as where the Lions tent, bingo tent is during schooner days. That's a hard surface. So if down the road we need some extra spots or some overflow, that can be configured to close to 20 to 25 parking spots. And then also on the other side of Rink 3, so the north side towards the football field, if we look at that on the site, there's the entire line of that sheet of ice on the north side could lend itself certainly to at least single-spaced car parking, maybe even double-spaced car parking. So, you know, as we keep moving forward, if we need to expand more than what we have both some programmatic methods for doing that and also some potential for expansion. And not the most convenient, but certainly across the street at Round Lake. And that could be something on certain events that might lend itself to a shuttle bus. We do have some 12-passenger vans that we could make use of, or again, require our own staff to park a little further over since they might be there for 8 hours. So I think we have some really good strategies. There's no question that January and February, certain times of the year, that just like as I used to go to Lifetime Fitness at certain times of the night, at certain times of the year, you might be kind of circling, waiting, but hopefully with some of our drop-offs that kids and parents can get dropped off safely if that's needed, or we can make that expansion if it's needed.
Yeah, actually, as a user of the fitness center there, it's surprisingly easy to find parking, and I think that would be of benefit to the fitness center users, is to ensure in that they come in for that, 1 hour, 45-minute type visit to have some reasonable parking. But it sounds like the strategies you have in mind are flexible, and I'm sure you'll be able to work it out.
Just building on that a little bit, and just so we're all clear on this, is the background behind this that you really were getting such significant usage of both your current aquatic facilities and the fitness center that you needed to expand? And doesn't that then imply significantly greater usage, and have you done some estimates on that?
Yeah, so two parts to that. One of the things to remember too, just when we think about the parking and the use, a lot of the people that are going to be coming in the future are already there now. They're just not in a very good situation when it comes to aquatics for a couple of reasons. One, we have a 30-year-old facility. The only piece that has not been renovated at the community center since the very beginning is the pool. Due to code changes over time, the depth required for doing starting blocks, we can no longer host meets because we can't use starting blocks. Our diving board is just barely hanging on and still staying within state code for diving boards. And also our roof. We know in our CIP project, if this does not go forward as a project, we need to do something with the roof of the aquatic center, which is $1 million or more to do what we would need to do just to stay the same. We have one body of water, so our temperature is good for almost nobody. For some it's too warm, for some it's too cold. For only very few would they tell you it's just right. And so what we know is that we've had a lot of excess demand to rent the time in the pool. We've had a lot of demand for people to have more lap swim time, as this has become more of a fitness facility for people. They would like to have more general lap swimming. We also know that with our Fox Jets, they are literally, I should have brought a photo of it, but they literally, when they swim, and same way with the high school, they swim almost nose to toes. And there's 8 to 10 kids in a lane going down 25 yards in front of each other. And so their numbers won't grow from 300 to 600. They might grow from 300 to 380 or 400, but it'll be a better swimming situation for those kids especially. There'll be more open swim times for the people that are already coming. We, in 2007, when we did the addition to the community center, there were approximately 600 people that were members of the facility, and most of those they were members so they could come for fitness or open swim, skate, and racquetball. We now have over 7,000 people that come for some type of a membership activity. About 1,200 of those are silver sneakers, which is seniors being reimbursed through their health insurance program, and they come throughout the day. And that's one of the things that we have, that if you just looked at a fitness facility, we have different markets coming at different times of the day. So we can have thousands of people that get spread out over about a 12-hour day versus some of those peaks and valleys that a lot of fitness facilities, if that's just what they were, would have. So being a community center, that really helps spread out a lot of the people that we have there. Are also in our design thoughts, we specifically moved and try to get hockey and figure skating to come through the far right, the general user to come through the middle, and now, instead of also putting all the aquatics through there, now this would flip the aquatics over to the left side and try to funnel them through the left side, so really spreading out that traffic flow as much as we can.
Well, thank you. A very thorough answer.
You're welcome.
I have a question. What is the current square footage? Today?
Yeah, we're at about 180. This net's a little over 30. It's about a 50 to 52,000 overall square footage of what will be constructed. But remember, some of that is in place of where the current pool is right now, so a little over 30 in net square footage. So it should bring us to around a little over 200, 220, 210, 220.
Yeah, it looks as though about 35,000, a little shy of 35,000 is a new construction, and the rest is going to be in remodel and refurbishing. So,
Yes.
so you'll be at around 210, 215
Right.
at the end of it.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions at all? Ma'am, are you interested in coming forward? Do you have a question at all? Okay, did you get your answer that you were looking for?
Well, yes and no.
If you wouldn't mind, can you come forward to the front, please? Can you state your name, spell your last name for city staff, please, and give us your question? Thank you.
My name is Margaret Gamble. It's Gamble. I guess the thing that came up during his explanation was that, to the best of my understanding, most of the parking spots at Round Lake are assigned for high school students, so I don't know how you could plan on using those except in the summer.
Yeah, during the day, the spots closest to the tennis courts, those are probably about 50% of those do get sold to high school students. We have a relationship with the high school where they need more parking during the day, and so actually daytime use at the community center, even in our upper lot, some of that is sold to the high school students for parking during the year. Some of them elect to go to the somewhat cheaper lot, which is over across the street at Round Lake. And what we found, especially since 2007 and 8, and since gas prices have been rising, not as many kids are getting the parking permits. They're not driving to school. So even over at Round Lake, only about half of what we used to sell to the high school is actually being taken during the day. So there is some available there. And
But isn't there a sign in front of every spot that says no parking 6 to
There is
2:30 or
yeah,
something?
there is
So how could you?
Yeah, there is a section over there that says permit parking only, just like in our upper lot too. There's a section that says permit parking only, but the lower lot, and it has between different times of the day. If we're ever tight on parking, it's more on nighttime and weekends that we would need the Round Lake. But if we do end up going with the concept where we would have our staff park over at Round Lake, that's certainly something, whether we did give them permits or they just parked in what's open to the public, because there's still both over there. There's student parking, probably 20% of the total parking spaces at Round Lake Park are students, reserved for students. The other is open to public parking at all times of the year and all times of the day.
Okay. And I also am concerned about the safety factor of crossing that busy street all the time.
Yeah.
And there's a bridge that's over there, but you'd have to walk kind of up to go over and then back down again.
Yeah, that's generally how the high school students that park over there get to school, is they walk over top of the bridge. We also see that as we do this design and look at traffic flow, we see a decent amount more opportunities to bring people through our back entrance, which will make that back parking lot more attractive. Also, some of the swim teams, Fox Jets, as we've been talking about, how do we give them access or entrance with some swipe cards? We won't have to force them through the front door because of having access. There's an opportunity to go through the back, which would then encourage them to be, parking closer to the back of the building too.
Got it. Ma'am, does that answer your question sufficiently enough? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I guess I'd like to just elaborate on that parking concern, or the question that was brought up, and then the concern by you, John. We've usually in the past, when project proponents come in front of us, ask very detailed questions, and they have to provide detailed answers in regards to the current parking condition and the future parking condition. And I guess we haven't been given detailed information as to what the existing is now, given that there's so many different variables. There's the school, and then there's the park, the Round Lake Park, and then there's those that are employees here, employees of the school district, who's going to share what costs and who's going to share what parking arrangements at certain times. And I guess I would like to see more information, just because it's the city that's coming forward with us. Doesn't mean that we have to just rubber stamp and pat ourselves on the back.
Yep.
I think we need to see more information on the parking issue. And now I also have other comments, but if we're going to continue, we could share that till another day.
Do they have to do I'm assuming that there would also have to be a proof of parking if they needed to come up with more parking spots. We've seen that in other proponents' projects. Mike, can you give us some detail on that?
How we look at the parking for the community center has to do with the type of uses that they have. So you look at the ice rinks and you look at the pools, we calculate that as kind of a warehouse space, because overall, over the course of the day, they're not all being used to their maximum potential. For the gymnasium, we look at gymnasiums like we have in other private uses like Lifetime Fitness. Those are calculated at 5 per thousand, and the meeting rooms are at 3 per thousand. So when we did the community center expansion, we took a look at the parking requirements, and we added parking to cover the additions that were made to the building. And so the only thing that we're expanding here is adding some additional pools, which we would put in the warehouse category, so it didn't trip any requirement in our city code that they would have to add more parking. Now, there's a lot of situations in restaurants and office buildings and recreational uses where their demand can peak during the course of the day or during the course of the week, and there usually are typically arrangements with adjoining property owners for the peak time periods. There is a project called Champions Hall, which is up in the industrial park off of 69th and Washington Avenue, and for the most part, in the evenings it works well, but whenever they have an event, they have lease agreements with the adjoining properties to accommodate their peak demand. So in the conversations I've had with our Park and Recs director, it seems like they're kind of modeling the practice that we've seen with other similar type of businesses in the community.
So does city staff, so I'm guessing the city staff doesn't have any concerns as far as the parking goes. That it didn't trip anything, and we're within standards of other proponents that have come through.
That's correct.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, with an expansion, you're expanding 35,000 new construction in what is presently 180,000. With an expansion, you're going to expect more people coming in. And I would hope you expect more people coming in to be able to defer the cost of the expansion, and so or new members, and not just more frequency of the current membership. And so I guess with those new members that you're expecting to, over the course of whatever your timetable, to be able to recapture the cost of this capital improvement, it could create a parking complication. And what are those figures? What are the projected figures based on your analysis that you're to see 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and then until the next time at which remodeling renovation would have to occur?
Yeah, and as Mr. Franzen said, tonight there are basically two things in front of the Planning Commission, and certainly parking meets code. So we haven't done any maps that we would show you total numbers and counts. Those have all been analyzed by both our consultant, our planning staff, and the background, and so I don't want to go too detailed because we've been before Parks Commission quite a bit to talk about some of the expected numbers and financials that would work out on this. But you're doing, and there's a lot behind those numbers too. Like there are some people that right now are dual members, and this might cause them to say, we want to be family members now, same car coming. So that might not change it. The different types of memberships would increase, but the total number of members may not. Again, we have 300 kids coming for Foxjet's swim practice, not all at one time, but they're all being pushed into the same smaller pool. Now they'll have more room. So it's not necessarily a doubling of what's already there. Some of it's just an ability to rent more time that's more attractive because of the different types of water, and so it spreads out throughout the day. We, as Mr. Franzen said, are no different than other cases, like when the high school has Edina versus Eden Prairie in football. There's a lot of competition for parking there. So what we have by code is adequate. What we think we can do going forward is better for the peak time so that our customers can be closer than what they may have to be right now. I think there are hundreds of spots around there that go unused. It's more of a desire to how people would like to park closer, and we want to accommodate that for our customers over our staff or others. And so, some of these strategies are just good strategies whether you had twice as many parking places as you needed or not.
Commissioners, do you have any other comments as far as parking? Does anyone have any other concerns? Travis, I know we had a couple other points too.
No, knowing that PNRC had debated this and talked about this parking thing, it wasn't included in our packet, but knowing that, the PNRC actually discussed this and they were fine with it, I yield the floor on that then.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought up the question to begin with, and I think from, the strict interpretation of our view is well, it meets code.
Right.
But I also feel that I think we got a good explanation that pointed out a lot of flexibility in how it could go beyond just meeting code, and as you say, look at your customer service aspect of it as well. So personally, I'm comfortable that I think the parking is a concern that has been looked at, and that there are some strategies out there to deal with it, and does strictly meet code as well. So personally, I'm comfortable with it. I don't know about the rest of the commissioners.
Ann, do you have a question?
Yes, I just have one thought, and it just came to me right now, so it isn't very formed, is that with the variety of new activity that folks will be able to take advantage of and feel more comfortable actually staying a little bit more than they may now, it occurs to me that sometimes, because I get over there not as much as I used to, but I've noticed that sometimes there's there's a terrific number of cars coming and going at certain times. That might be something to look at going forward because of the entry out onto Valley View and the timing of some of that, which I think your folks will come across quickly in their own thinking. But it occurred to me that's not really in our bailiwick exactly, but traffic control may need to have some play in all of this too.
Yeah, two things to that. We on some of those bigger event nights too, especially when everybody comes at the same time for the 7 o'clock game.
Exactly.
We have put in place, both at the entrance to the facility and then also at the drop-off area, we've put in place some more traffic control people. You'll see them in a bright vest. The other thing that we know will benefit from, and we want to do it sooner than later, and I think it's pretty easy to do, is a lot of people that come there now come there for the first time. If you're coming for an away game, you're the away team coming for a game. And so what we want to try to do, and we've worked on a signage program that we probably should have done sooner, but I think it'll be helpful, is to really try to get people who are not familiar with our parking directed to those spots. If we can get the people that are coming for ice far to the north, that makes it closer for them, and it leaves open closer spots for people that are coming for fitness or would be coming for aquatics, and vice versa. So I think you'll see more signage in our parking lots with more arrow directions that really try to split off the concept of where to park. Because I've seen a lot of people drive around the really close spots for fitness when there's 3 or 4 rows up by the ice sheets parking that are completely empty.
I think that's an excellent
wait and drive
response.
around. And so,
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, and I think that's a good beginning to get
yeah,
some
I think we
idea
can
of how to do that.
signage-wise without a lot of cost, but then there's also those times where it's just everybody's coming at once, depending on what the event might be.
Right.
Okay.
I'd like to shift away from traffic and onto the pool, or parking and onto the pool quickly.
Sure,
You had
go
a
ahead.
graphic that showed the 2 pools next to each other as kind of a long view graphic from the corner, from the bleacher area.
And that was the rendering that we saw, right?
The rendering, yeah. While you're hunting for it, I guess I'll start with my comments. I went to well, part of my undergrad, I was at a university in Wisconsin, and they had 2 pools similar to that, and both of them were within whatever regulations were for lap swim at 25 yards, and then are you able to pull it up on the screens? So then, if you were able to look at the center median between the 2 pools, the university that I was at, that median actually was movable, and it was able to go the entire length all the way down to one side, and then you had an Olympic length pool going the opposite direction. Is that something that had been looking at? Because
Yeah, you'll see that at colleges and universities, and if you're going to host the most competitive meets that are out there at the highest competitive levels, that's a lot of times what you'll try to do in order to make it a little more multi-purpose. So that's about, and the 50-meter, there's only, even in the competitive swimmers, the 50-meter is only used by a small percentage of the competitive swimmers. So when you look at designing a community aquatics center or a community pool situation, adding in that to try to get to that, what you might use for a small percentage of the year costs you just in dollars a lot of money because that bulkhead is about a $400,000 expenditure. It's a movable bulkhead. You could have it all the way down. You could have it halfway. You could have it 3/4 of the way. And then the other piece is to have a really good then 25-meter or yard competition pool. You start to get where you want all of your depths uniform going across all of the lanes to make it the most uniformly competitive. And so what you see here is this is about 7 feet 6. This goes up to about 3 foot 6, and it comes up so that you can use the starting blocks appropriately and safely. Over here, remember, this is about 12 feet in depth, and so that you could do the diving piece of that. But also, you're talking about different bodies of water, which is a really good thing for redundancy. It's also a good thing for water temperature in that, again, this is the coldest pool, highly competitive. This is the one where you would see the Fox Jets in the high school meets primarily. This is the one that becomes a lot more flexible. It's probably where the kids that are going to go for open swim, if you're talking about teens that really want to get in and use the pool, they're going to go in this slightly warmer water, more depth, ability to play some water polo, water basketball situation. And so as we, because we did hear from the 1 or 2% of the most highly competitive that says you should do a 50-meter, we would love it. They would love it, but it's not the best use of the facility for overall community members, and it's not the best use of our funding sources to add that in. We actually get more flexibility by not having this as one large body of water with a movable bulkhead than we do with having it as a large body of water. So, and at a reduced cost to doing that too. So you will see that. I think you'll see that at the U of M. A lot of colleges will do that. Not the best approach for a community center or community pool when you're going to have multiple bodies of water, when you could have them.
My question for you, one of the things that we're approving, if I read this correctly, is what's called the site plan review. What is that? What's the import of that, and what does that really mean? And then I have a follow-up with it.
We have a section in our city code called Site Plan and Architectural Design Review, where we look at more than just the bulk height, density, setback, and parking requirements. Has to do a little bit more about where the building is in the property, how you get pedestrian access in and out of there. What does the building look like architecturally? How does it relate to the building mass? Does it blend in? Does it add some interest to it? And how does it use landscaping more than just a quantitative requirement, kind of a qualitative requirement? It takes we get a better design out of the product than by following the mathematical elements of our city code.
Mhm.
That's what it does.
Thank you. So here's, I guess, just the question I have. We've got a wonderful looking project with a lot of detail, and we're playing a role, and then there is another commission playing a role in looking at this project. And my sense from a business perspective is a little bit that some of the questions that are coming up because we are not as fully informed in terms of the background for this project and some of the details that have gotten us to where we are now, as we probably should be. So the question I have really is for projects like this, where there is some sharing between commissions and there is relevance to what may have been discussed there versus what we're being asked to look at here, how could we improve that process or share more or something like that, just so, because like a lot of the questions we're asking right now have something to do with projections of usage and really ROI, return on investment, and all those kinds of things. And my sense is we're missing some of that background, partially maybe because we should have been reading some things that we didn't and so on, and I just want to bring that topic up. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is an even better understood background on the part of this commission would facilitate discussion, I would think, for the future for these kinds of things. And it could involve sharing with the other commission to a greater degree than we do today. That's all.
And I think, Steve, I understand what you're saying. When you take a look at what the duties are of this commission's, specifically what the request is for, right? Yeah. So I would say if there's more additional information, maybe you could just send us a note, Mike, when the other commissions are talking about it, that we could go to those meetings if we so choose.
Sure.
That way it would help people be more informed if they want to be more informed, to get into a little bit more of the granular piece of it. And if they don't want to, then that's fine. They'll get their packet and we'll discuss it in this meeting. Is that fair?
Sure, maybe a liaison or something, because that's why I ask about the site review, because that strikes me as a broader request of this commission than simply the setback.
Right.
And in fact, it strikes me as quite broad, which would require some architectural understanding and so on. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but I just want to make sure that we've got the information we need to give you the kind of response that facilitates the process.
Yeah, I think as far as, the discussions that we've had tonight, I think as far as what our goals and tasks are as the Planning Commission, that we're okay with the information that we're getting, but certainly if we want to get more information, Mike, you can point us to the right direction, and therefore if we want to go to those meetings, we can go to those meetings and be a little bit even more informed, which would be great.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes,
we've had joint commission meetings in the past, and
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
maybe that would be a fruitful opportunity to have a joint meeting with PNRC as well as the planning here, and the same facts are presented, and we're looking at it through different lenses, but ultimately the goal is to send a good product off to City Council so that they're able to see a lot of the things that are vetted from our perspective, and then they're able to look at the macro picture of things. Now, I'm assuming that the Budget Advisory Committee probably weighs in since it's expenditures of taxpayers' dollars or something like that too. So, but that's another thing. I don't think we want to be a part of that. But I think on the PNR, at least since it is parkland and they're asking for a site plan review, which is quite broad in the scope of what we have jurisdiction in questioning, I think that it would be prudent to have that, to at least entertain that opportunity.
Yep, and I think we can. That wouldn't stop what needs to come to this commission to come to this commission. So it would just be adding another meeting. It wouldn't be getting rid of another meeting, in other words, because we still need to get public access and whatnot.
Yep.
Mike, do you have anything to add as far as that goes?
No, I don't, not at this point.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just
Yes, please, go
in
ahead.
terms of if that were to happen with this project, generally, we've had a history in the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources Commission of having joint meetings, but they're very broad. They're really about 6 or 7 topics when we meet with the Heritage Preservation Commission. It's all of the things, it isn't one project specific. When we meet with the Conservation Commission, same thing. It's multiple things that the commissions have a joint interest in. So not that that couldn't happen with the Planning Commission. In fact, we're not that far away from our next 10-year CIP, which has a lot of our capital projects in them. Most of them in the past haven't or wouldn't require any waivers or variances. They're standard park project updates. In the case of this project, we take it with the Parks Commission back a couple years and then doing a feasibility study, which got onto their agenda and their radar almost every month for the last over a year. This has been an item that's been on their agenda as a progress. We've had multiple council updates at their workshops. And so the spot where we're at right now with this whole project of getting a ton of citizen and community feedback, of having open houses with the city council, of going to council workshops, of every month having updates on the Parks Commission, we're now, this next council meeting, we'll be in front of the city council giving them updates on the design. The similar looks to what you've seen tonight, only some of them, they'll get even more detailed over this next week as the architects continue to flesh out some of the interiors, cabinetry and things even. So we'll do that in this next council meeting, and then we're expected back in May. So really the only next time, there'll be 2 times that the Park Commission talks about this. It'll be at the April meeting, and then it'll also be at the May meeting. And what will happen at the May meeting will be presenting them with the bids. So we will open bids at the end of April. We'll go to the Parks Commission April 6th and tell them about what the cost came in. We'll be asking them for a recommendation to the City Council, either to award bids or to do something differently. The very next night we'll be at City Council asking them to award the bids. So from an architectural standpoint, from a layout, a design, this is well over a year in development, using some well-regarded architects and a lot of community survey, a lot of direction from council, Parks Commission to get to this point. So we're 95% of the way there. Not that you wouldn't be welcome, and you are at any commission meeting, but wouldn't be welcome to come to our April and our May meeting too, which will have more details there. But it's really, at that stage, it's about here's what the final design looks like. Here's what now the known cost is. Should we recommend it to go forward to the council? So we're getting very close. But,
right. Jay, and I don't think anyone's saying here, that we need to take a step back or anything like that. I think it's just moving forward.
Sure.
Of keeping, shooting us notes. Mike can shoot us some emails and just tell us, hey, if you want to be available, this is the subjects that are going to be discussing at that time, and we can certainly decide for ourselves if we want to go or not. But I don't think you need to make any, drastic changes to what's being done already. I would just keep moving forward and doing what you're doing. And we appreciate that.
But welcome to attend any of our upcoming Parks Commissions.
Great. And then I guess we just need to take a look at it, Mike, and make sure that we're not, we're keeping, with all the government acts and regulations and having a quorum put together at that place as well, too. Okay. Okay. So I think we've had some great conversation. I want to move forward if anyone doesn't object to that. If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, move to close public hearing.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Move to recommend approval of the site plan review on 103 acres in final order 2014-02.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for
You
your
bet.
time.
All right, Mr. Franz, moving on to planners' reports. What do you have for us tonight?
We have a presentation
Okay?
tonight. We've invited our consultant from HKGI to let you know what the county and the individual cities have been working on for a little bit more than a year. And it's all about developing an public infrastructure plan so that when the light rail line is open, you want to make sure you have good access, you want to make sure the sewer and water is available, a good trail system, a good signage plan, a good lighting plan, and you have parking in the right location. So we basically analyzed all the stations to look at what the current deficiencies are. Then we as a city put together a very lengthy spreadsheet to give to the consultants so they could put that into the plan and put those into action statements and drawings so that the project office can figure out what the total costs are going to be for doing the construction work around the stations. So we're going to tell you where we started, kind of how we got here, and what kind of are the big things that we want to make sure that we do correctly at each of the 5 stations in Eden Prairie. So at this point, I'll turn it over, and we'll start our presentation. We're not going to go over all potential 500 slides that you might normally have seen in a presentation. We covered all 5 cities, so we narrowed that down quite a bit. And what was included in your packet was simply the introduction and the plan for each of our 5 cities. The remainder of the document that was for other cities, we decided not to include.
Okay.
Mike, you're going to have to punch in your password.
Locked up again? We're all set.
Good evening. My name is Jeff McMiniman, and I'm a landscape architect and planner with Hoisington Kogler Group. We were the lead planner on a multidisciplinary team that worked on what we refer to as the TSAP work, which stands for Transitional Station Area Action Plans. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the work that we've been doing over the past 14 months on the 17 stations that are part of the Southwest LRT line. And I'll first walk through kind of the background, some general stuff, and then I'll focus more on the 5 stations that are in Eden Prairie and talk about some of the recommendations at each one of those stations. So, as I mentioned, the Transitional Station Area Action Plans, or TSAP, those are the purpose of the project is intended to promote opening day readiness at each one of the station areas. So we working in concert with the project engineering team that was doing preliminary design for the rail line itself and doing design and engineering work for the platforms themselves to look at on opening day, how can we bridge that gap between current conditions and the future needs by addressing the station platform locations. So in some cases, we were able to influence the engineering team to locate the station, ideally for enhancing ridership on the light rail line. We looked at park and ride sites at each one of the stations where there was determined to be a park and ride site. We looked at future development potential around some of the station platforms, and in some cases there was great development potential and others not so much. One of our primary goals was to look at enhancing access and circulation to each one of the station areas. So for instance, if there were new sidewalks or trails or bikeways, needed to get people from either their homes to those station platforms or from their jobs to those station platforms. We're looking at ways to enhance that. Looking at infrastructure planning around each one, so new utilities, new roadways, those kinds of things, and then stormwater management options as well. So there was a lot of coordination between our team, the TSAP team, and the PE team. We began with a Project Charrette about a year ago, last February, where we developed some preliminary design ideas around each one of the stations. We had regular issue resolution team meetings with the PE teams that also included city staff members. I'm looking at Mike and Rod over here, and I know that they were at a lot of those meetings as well. We had weekly coordination meetings with the PE teams. We had monthly meetings with city staff from the 5 cities that were part of the Southwest LRT line. We had shared advisory committee meetings, business advisory committee meetings, and citizen advisory committee meetings. And then we also had shared open houses and public events with the engineering team. There was a continuous public engagement process throughout the life of the project. Listening sessions, open houses, neighborhood and community interest group meetings. We had meetings with the project engineering team that we also attended. There were website information e-blasts, and we used this website process called Mind Mixer, which allows people to get on to the city's websites and provide input on different alternatives around each one of the station areas online. As I mentioned, there was a 14-month planning process. City by city, station by station was our approach, so that there was not a cookie cutter type of solution around each station, but there were custom planning decisions made at each one of the station areas. The outcome is this big manual, which I don't know if you guys have been able to see the whole thing, but this is 17 different stations. There's some upfront materials that talks more generally about the character, the corridor character, and each one of the stations is maybe a different type of station. You've probably heard the term transit-oriented design, right? So which suggests like mixed-use kinds of things. Well, these stations are all a little bit different. Some might be employment centers. Some might be more mixed-use residential kinds of centers. Others might be more park and ride types of transit centers. So we had to take a pretty customized approach for planning around each one of them. But the things that we looked at were, we looked at the existing conditions. We needed to know where the gaps were in the systems, particularly with circulation systems, getting people to and from each station. We looked at the station platform locations themselves and were able to influence those in some cases. Again, park and rides, development potential, access and circulation, infrastructure, and stormwater. So now I'm going to try to be brief, but walk through each one of the Eden Prairie stations, and I'm just going to hit on the highlights because there's a ton of information in here around each one of those stations. There are recommendations in here that are long-term and recommendations that are what I'd call more short-term, opening day recommendations to make sure that people can get to and from those station platforms on opening day. So we'll walk through these quickly. So City West is the most northerly of the Eden Prairie stations. Can you guys hear me just fine?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. Doing great.
So for each one of these stations, as I mentioned, we looked at existing conditions. So we look at existing land uses, and in the case of City West, those existing land uses are employment uses, 6,700 new jobs at United Health Group adjacent to this station platform. And then to the south, there's some multifamily housing. We look at roadways, and in some cases, those roadways are great barriers to accessing the stations. And so in this case, at City West, highways 62 and 212 are barriers for people getting to and from that station. We look at existing transit service to each station area. We look at sidewalks, trails, and bikeways, utilities, stormwaters, and we look at amenities and destinations, because some of those things are going to drive ridership, transit ridership at each station. We want to make sure that people can get to and from those destinations to the station platforms. So for each one of the stations, we look at those kinds of factors. At City West, the pedestrian and bike connections, what we're recommending as stationary improvements is to develop more direct path connections between the station and City West Parkway, which is to the south and to the west of this station platform. We're looking at developing pedestrian connections between the station and the United Health Group buildings themselves, because you're going to have 6,700 new jobs there, and those folks are going to be using light rail. We talked about streetscape enhancements, bike facilities at each station area, and then the idea of exploring bike sharing facilities, so like Nice Ride kinds of things, bike lockers, pumping stations, those kinds of things. We look at Kiss and Ride at this station, so folks that want to drop people off, get on the light rail, and then they take off, and then pick them up at the end of the day, that kind of thing. We look at Park and Ride, right? So the blue area on there is the Park and Ride lot. The Kiss and Rides within that area as well. In this case, there are approximately about 200 Park and Ride spaces at this lot.
200, did you say?
200, yeah. And we recommended incorporating things like trees and plantings to enhance the image of that parking facility. We also recommended station amenities that go above and beyond what the SPO means. That's the project office. And so the engineering team is responsible for a certain amount of station area planning, which included some wayfinding, some seating, some lighting, those kinds of things. So at each one of the station areas, if you look through the document, we recommend above and beyond that additional wayfinding that reaches out beyond the station platform itself to help people orient themselves and get to that station platform from those employment centers and from their homes. Seating, lighting, in this case a plaza area, just to the north of the Park and Ride, adjacent to the platform, public art, and bike facilities. Development potential. At City West, the near-term development potential has to do with United Health Group. At some of the other stations, there's more development potential. But we looked at key considerations to enhance development potential around each one of the station platforms. So we looked at things like built form and land use, the public realm, those kinds of improvements, and then mobility kinds of considerations. So in this case, built form and land use, orienting the buildings to face onto the station, maybe locating retail amenities near the station to help service transit users and some of the employees at the new United Health Group. Create a positive image on the campus and LRT from the highway itself. Public realm, create a public plaza that accommodates transit riders, cyclists, and pedestrians. And then new trails that will help connect this campus to the broader regional network and enhance pedestrian crossings at the driveways. For each one of these, and I'm going to take a little bit more time with City West, and we'll kind of walk through it more quickly on the other stations, because I'm just introducing some of these things. But for each one of the stations, then you'll see a table like this with associated maps. And these are opening day improvements only. Some of the other maps that you saw also include long-term improvements. But in this case, on the left-hand side is a table, the top portion of which lists the improvements that are recommended by the engineering team. And the map just to the right of that on the top highlights those recommendations, those improvements that will be made by the project engineering team on opening day. So for instance, in this case, the Park and Ride, the station platform itself, some of the trail connections, those kinds of things. So in addition to those improvements made by the project engineering team, our team, working with city staff, identified additional improvements. So those are things that are listed in the bottom two charts that you see there. The middle chart includes opening day recommendations beyond the project engineering team's recommendations. The lower chart, the lowest one there, includes what we call betterments, that we are asking the project engineering team to consider funding if indeed there are funding sources available to build those betterments. So now I'll go through these a little bit quicker because we've taken the time to explain what's in that. So Golden Triangle is the next southerly station. Again, we looked at the same kinds of existing conditions around this station. Of course, the existing conditions around here, the land uses include more light industrial and office kinds of uses. In this case, we recommended some new roadways to help activate the area around the station platform, and really to help also incent new development or future development near the station itself. And these recommendations that you'll see are pretty consistent with the Golden Triangle Land Use and Transportation Study that was done probably about 10 years ago. So in this case, and the city's already been looking at extending West 70th Street to the west to Flying Cloud Drive. It also looks at some long-term wise, to develop a new block and street network beyond Flying Cloud Drive and Shady Oak Road to provide some smaller blocks so it's more walkable. Today, this is not a very walkable environment out there. There are huge blocks, very few roads, and some trails, but not really enough to, promote the use of this new light rail station the way it should be used. We looked at ped and bike connections, creating a multi-use trail system from the station north to Shady Oak Road and south to Valley View Road, extending existing path networks east and west of the station platform, new sidewalks along both sides of West 70th Street. We identified streetscape and intersection enhancements within the area, providing bike parking near the station and exploring potential for bike sharing near the station. At Golden Triangle, there's a small need for park and ride. We looked near term at the idea of leasing some existing surface parking spaces in the two darker blue areas that you see there to meet park and ride goals. And then long term, had some discussions about considering park and ride shared in a ramp just to the west of the station platform. And so those park and ride spaces would be shared with a proposed office development just to the south of that park and ride lot. And then there's Kiss and Ride along West 70th right next to the station platform. Again, similar kinds of stationary amenities beyond and above the SPO base project scope. In this case, because we're recommending some new roadways, we also took a look at some conceptual street sections to try and make these pedestrian friendly. And the idea of fronting those sidewalks with new buildings. Today, the buildings are set way back from the street. And so, it's not a very friendly, pedestrian friendly sort of situation there. Getting a multi-use trail on the north side of West 70th, the sidewalk on the south side. Getting some on-street parking lanes in there, and then some streetscape kinds of amenities, furnishings, and those kinds of things. Some new lighting, street trees, that kind of thing. We did look long-term at pretty significant development potential around this station. Again, these are consistent with that 10-year-old Golden Triangle Land Use and Transportation Study, which calls for some new housing in this area, medium to higher density housing. So you're talking about some townhomes and some apartment-style units. And so you can see those in those colors that are sort of pumpkin-colored to brown. That's more of the multifamily housing. The darkest brown also includes mixed use. So maybe at the ground level near the station platform, there are some coffee shops or restaurants or those kinds of things that help support transit users at the station platform. And then you see some office uses and some commercial uses, which are pretty consistent with the uses out there today. Looked at some public realm improvements, and again, mobility improvements, a network of trails and sidewalks and pedestrian-friendly streets. So similar kind of situation here. The table on the left highlights those improvements, and I'm not going to go through those. There are just too many here. But improvements proposed by the engineering team, improvements proposed by the TSAP team that go beyond the engineering recommendations, and then again at the bottom, those betterments. Eden Prairie Town Center is the next station coming south of Golden Triangle. Again, looking at the same kinds of existing conditions. In this case, of course, you all know a lot of commercial and retail kinds of uses around there, some office uses, some multifamily housing, and some significant park and open space uses as well. We're recommending some new roadways that are, again, consistent with the town center master plan. So the idea of some new roads to create smaller block patterns here and a more connected roadway network, which will make this a much more pedestrian-friendly kind of town center. In this case, to service the proposed alignment and station platform location, Eden Road would need to be extended west to the station platform. We've also looked at the idea of extending or building a portion of what's been identified as Main Street from Singletree Lane north to Technology Drive. So that would provide northwest or north and south connections through the town center from the station platform. And then long term, again, those new roadways to create smaller block sizes and a more gridded street network in the town center itself. Ped and bike connections, streetscape enhancements, connecting to the regional trails, improved pedestrian crossings at the intersections. Complete street design is recommended at these, so trying to accommodate as many forms of transportation as possible, the car, the pedestrian, the bicycle, and public transit. This plan here that you see is consistent with the town center plan. And then new bike facilities on Main, Eden, and Singletree, and bike amenities at the station platform itself. We did look at the idea of perhaps some park and ride within the town center itself, and particularly early on, before the town center becomes this, what the city has envisioned as a town center here. And the idea was to try and reduce the, what we anticipate might happen is, we call it hide and ride, right? So people park in some of those existing parking lots today and then use the transit system. So we identified a couple of park and ride sites that also could be looked at as potential joint development sites. And when I say that, what I mean is it could be a park and ride that's in a ramp that has a wrap of maybe some retail use at the ground level and maybe other kinds of uses integrated in with that building itself. And then again, the kiss and ride near the station platform along Eden Road. Similar kinds of station amenities, wayfinding, seating, lighting, a plaza near the station platform, some public art and bike facilities. Eden Road, we've taken a look at that as well, extending that west to the station platform. So you see this conceptual street section here with on-street parking, sidewalk and trail on both sides of the street, transit facilities, lighting, street trees and plantings. We've also looked at the future Main Street. This is consistent again too with the streetscape master plan that was done for the city a couple years ago. So generous sidewalks, 20-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street, some on-street bike lanes, on-street parking, lighting, street trees, planting, and public art. And then, of course, you know, with those infrastructure improvements and the idea of trying to create this town center here, there's tremendous development potential. Those new roads, the investment in the light rail station should incent new development in and around the area. We looked at mixed-use infill. Again, these are uses that are consistent with the town center plan. Orienting buildings to the street, active street-level uses, an active public realm with a plaza and some improvements along Flying Cloud Drive to try and reduce the perception of that being such a wide roadway and bridge that gap a little bit between the town center itself and the shopping center across Flying Cloud Drive. Mobility, the new street and block pattern and pedestrian-friendly streets should all help make this a more pedestrian-friendly environment. Again, the opening day improvements, the charts on the left, the maps on the right. So you can see the engineering team will be putting in the light rail line, the extension of Eden Road West, and then a sidewalk from the station platform connecting up to single tree lane. The TSAP team recommends building Main Street from single tree lane up to Technology Drive. We think that's an important investment to help increase ridership of the station here. Moving west now, the Southwest Station, located at the existing Southwest Transit Station area. Again, looked at similar kinds of existing conditions. Recommending some pedestrian and bike connections with new multi-use trails to connect up with Prairie Center Drive and Technology Drive from the station platform. Sidewalk and streetscape enhancements along Technology Drive and Prairie Center Drive. Enhanced pedestrian crossings across Technology Drive to Purgatory Creek Park and some of the existing businesses that address on Technology Drive. And then new bike facilities at the stations. The park and ride at this station, this may require some expansion, so perhaps a new ramp. That is yet to be determined, but if that is the case, that would be paid for by the engineering project. The Kiss and Ride located near the station platform too. Similar kinds of station area amenities. And then we didn't see a tremendous amount of development potential around this station, but some. And in this case, integrating active street level uses within the park and ride facility in the event that a new park and ride ramp would be built. Introducing a mix of high density residential or commercial uses over time on some of the sites that today might be surface parking lots. And then orienting buildings to the street. Mobility improvements would include things like minimizing conflicts between the bus drop-off and the Kiss and Ride, improving access and connections to Purgatory Creek Park. Opening day improvements. And then we'll go to the end of the line here, Mitchell Station. Existing conditions, looking at that. Some light industrial, some office. Of course, the city center here, and then residential to the south. And one of the things that we saw here is being able to improve connections to that residential neighborhood to the south by extending Hiawatha Ave from Scenic Heights Drive to Technology Drive to the station platform, so that folks don't have to, if they live in the residential neighborhood to the south, they don't have to come all the way over to Mitchell Road and then this long walk over to the station platform itself. So the station platform was located near the north end of where that Hiawatha Avenue would be. And there's also been a park and ride ramp identified there in the blue. So that would be just to the northwest of the city center here. Ped and bike connections, looked at streetscape enhancements on some of the existing roadways and on Hiawatha Avenue. New sidewalks and trails to complete the existing network and connect to nearby neighborhoods and businesses, and then bike amenities near the station. I mentioned the park and ride, which would be a new ramp, which I think is projected to have about 960 spaces in it, something like that, close to 1,000. In the northwest corner of the city center site with access off of Technology Drive, Kiss and Ride facility would be located in that same site area with access off of Technology Drive. Similar kinds of station area amenities at this station platform too. And here you see the conceptual street section for Hiawatha Lane. Key considerations for development potential around the area were primarily to do with maybe over time increasing some of the density and mix of some of those uses that are out there today, which include office and light industrial. Maybe some food and services to help service some of the employees near the station, orienting buildings to the street, active street level uses, a pedestrian promenade between the station platform itself and City Hall with some landscaping. We see folks that work and use the city center here as being potential transit users. And then enhancing mobility to and from the station with pedestrian-friendly streets and some new sidewalks and that kind of thing. Opening day improvements. And then Mitchell Station was one of the 4 stations along the line that was identified for our team to look at stormwater best management practices. And the 4 different stations represented different kinds of circumstances, very urban circumstances, very industrial kinds of circumstances, and in this case, a more suburban-like circumstance here. So those best management practices looked at the idea of low-impact design kinds of strategies that would store and reuse stormwater runoff, include things like bioinfiltration cells, like rain gardens. That's a fancy word for a rain garden. To help take some of the pressure off of the pipe system that's in the street by catching stormwater runoff before it ever gets to that pipe system and infiltrating that runoff into these infiltration sites. So with that, that's the closing of my presentation. Welcome to take any questions or comments that you have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Mr. Franzen, do you have anything to add before we go to the commissioners for comments?
Just want to tell you from my perspective why I think this was a good exercise to go through. Because beginning in next year, we're going to start our 2018 Guide Plan Update. And we're going to kind of expand our redevelopment chapter, or we may create a separate chapter regarding development around each of our 5 light rail stations, where we're going to get into looking at different types of development scenarios for each of the stations, and each of the stations are probably going to have their own distinct identity. So we want to have an inventory of what's out there that we need to make sure that we put into the plan so that not only functions the day that it opens, but it's going to work with redevelopment schemes that we think are important along the corridor and along the stations. The second reason I think it's a good idea to do this is that we want to be able to inform the property owners and the developers about the city plans and the light rail plans. So if they decide to expand their business, or if some developer comes in and wants to take down a few buildings and do something different, we want to make sure that their vision is aligned with the city vision and the vision for the light rail. So that's kind of why I think this is a good exercise that we've gone through at this point. I think as a staff and as a consultant group, we've been very thorough in what we looked at and covering everything we felt was important. We've indicated to the project office the things that we think are the most important things that need to be done, because there's only so much money to go around, and everybody's going to get probably a slice of whatever that money amount is finally going to end up being. And we're going to want to make sure that the things that are most important to us are covered as part of project cost. There will probably be some other improvements that we are normally going to do as part of our capital improvement program, which we typically update every couple of years, and we most definitely include in the next Guide Plan Update that will list not only improvements around the light rail station, but public improvements for the city as a whole.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have a quick question. I know at one point in time, this Mitchell Station was in question basically because of funding. What is going on with that? Is that still moving forward? Are we still thinking about adding that in? Obviously, it's part of the presentation. Did that make it kind of through the cut, at least for now?
For now, I think that the Mitchell Station is still up in the air in terms of the project office.
Okay.
It will depend on funding.
Okay.
How much money's available.
Right. But that would probably be one of the first ones to go, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I'm going to just go to it right now. the project office asked us to put some language in here about Mitchell Station. And let's see if I can find that quick. So, about this is in the first page that is in the introduction to the Mitchell Station. The note they asked us to put in here is that the Metropolitan Council has not determined the Southwest LRT project scope and budget. As of December 2013, the Southwest Project Office recommends terminating the line at the Southwest Station. So we included it in here at the direction of the Hennepin County and the cities that we're working with. And a lot of planning work had gone into the Mitchell Station. So whether or not it's included, I think, will depend on available funding, wherever the budget ends up for this.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, what other kind of questions do you have, if any?
Just one comment. I mean, the work, pretty amazing to me how much detail is in these documents and how much work must have gone into them. So I think we very much appreciate being shown these. Since you don't really know how much funding is going to come, assuming the project is approved, how much funding we're going to get, this looks to me like a prioritized menu. Am I understanding that correctly? That could operate at different levels depending upon the amount of approved funding. So funding A level may get a certain percentage of these things done by station. Funding B level would get another percentage added on incrementally, and funding C level would, whatever that would be, would get more added. So I assume this is workable at a number of different levels. Another reason for having done it, kind of in line with what you said, Mike.
I would say that's a very accurate statement.
That's right.
A very accurate statement.
Okay. And
It was part of the intent.
I mean, how do you eat? Well, I shouldn't ask now, but we'll talk maybe at another time how you estimate even what the range of potential funding by station could be. But it looks like great.
It's another 2 hour.
I think that's a better job.
What'd you say? I'm
So
sorry.
that's another 2 hour meeting,
Yeah.
at least.
Well, and some of the recommendations in the document go beyond opening day funding ability. And we did provide to the county, and I think the cities have access to that as well, a cost estimate for opening day improvements as well as long-term, beyond opening day improvements. So taking a look at some estimates for all of those improvements have been looked at. And the intent for that was to assist cities with the ability to put together budgets for capital improvement projects in the future.
And just one other quick question, where you have some developments that have been looked at by the city before, like Presbyterian Homes, that may or may not occur once they complete their Wyzetta development. That's a huge project. I mean, could that distort what's been done in terms of that particular station? Or, I mean, how did you even take that into account? Because you don't know for sure it's going to happen.
You know, when we were looking at alternatives for where the light rail line would go through the town center, we did look at an option that went down closer to Presbyterian Homes, and it'd be closer to the apartments that were to the south, but you had to look at the cost of the construction of the line and the additional time it would take to go basically past the Eden Prairie Mall, down to Presbyterian Homes, back along Prairie Center Drive and over to Southwest Station. Just couldn't rationalize spending that kind of money and have too long of a travel time to get from Eden Prairie to downtown. And that was the primary reason why that was not included.
Thank you.
But we did look at those numbers for employment and households, and we felt that it was really important to get the station platform south of Technology Drive, where it was proposed to be when we started our work. So we were able to influence the project engineering team to move it south.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I had one town center plan, and I don't want to stir the pot. I know this has been a long conversation in the past. I was just curious, is it possible to construct the road going north from Single Tree up to it would be, I believe, the Eden extension through to technology without actually having to either take the Brunswick building or have any kind of modification to the site.
Actually, we've had quite a few discussions with Brunswick about how we would accomplish this, and a lot of it is focused on how they can maintain their level of parking. So we've been exploring various options where that parking could be fulfilled, whether it was in a deck on their property or whether it was a joint parking facility with the park and ride in the situation. And I would say that we still haven't reached a conclusion about that at this point, but it's something that we've been very good about keeping not only Brunswick, but the adjacent property owners aware of how these plans continue to change and evolve.
Great.
What's the next step for this, Mike?
Well, I can tell you that this presentation is going to occur at a city council workshop on March 4th, basically the same presentation. I'm not sure exactly what questions are going to be asked of the city council, but with comments we get back from the city council, if there's anything else they wanted us to include in this, or if you felt there was something that we also needed to include in the document, we would do so. We would bring this back for an approval because Hennepin County would like to know that all of the cities along the line have kind of bought into this as a basis for going forward with further development of concept plans around each of the stations. This is something that is going to be referenced in our next Sky Plan update as well. So you'll have an opportunity to come back and revisit some of the improvements that may not be borne by the project office, but other improvements the city would be involved in as part of the capital improvements, or improvements that end up being a joint benefit for the city and the developer is another way of getting some of these improvements done. For example, West 70th Street in Golden Triangle, half of that is going to be paid for by the property owner where super value was located, because that was a condition of approval with the development agreement. And the other funding we would hope come from the project office, complete the balance of that over to Shady Oak Road. And so there'll be opportunities along the way where we figure out, a number of different types of financial resources used to, meet our expectations that we've outlined in this particular program at this point.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have anything that you would like to add into the public record, I guess, that the mayor can look at and the other members of city council? Does anybody have any direction or any comments that they'd like to make? Not seeing any. Yes, sir? Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I think about is that strategic plans, like the one that Eden Prairie has, are looked at periodically, as you've said. Are the chances that our strategic goals for, like, the town center could be somewhat different as a result of the new planning cycle and therefore have significant impact on something like this? I mean, I guess that's kind of a hard question to answer, and it's a very general question, but ideally you'd want a very strong sense of where the city wants to go in the future, pretty up to date, tying into this very expansive project, and the two things are done at different times.
Well, one of the things that we're going to do for our next Sky Plan update is what we thought was very successful with our previous one. We had a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the City Council where we talked about, here is our last comp plan, and here were our value statements and what we wanted to do. Here where we think as a staff is where some new value statements or modified value statements might want to be in your next Sky Plan update. here's where we think you might want to concentrate your development activities, or for example, modifications to town center, and bounce the direction off of both of you, because we don't want to march down the road into our next sky plan update and bring the plan back in and say, do you like it or not like it? We want to know if we're going in the right direction to start with, so we don't waste a lot of time and energy and have to come back and redo some things. So I think that's probably the most appropriate time that we would have to engage in a philosophical discussion about the direction of our future growth in the community.
And I would say, Steve, too, it's probably more, it's not a rewrite, it's an update, as the name says.
And I was even going to add that having John and I went through that process, that, the whole LRT concept was out there at the time.
Right.
Okay.
So we didn't do it in a vacuum. The whole town center concept and all was not done in a vacuum, not thinking about LRT. Now, obviously, it was in a much earlier stage.
But it was definitely part of the conversation.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you, Mike.
Go ahead, Jeff.
My question would be coming back to the town center area, and maybe Katie's comment kind of spurred a thought process in my head on rerouting out of Eden Road onto maybe Single Tree or bringing it south. What kind of considerations were taken into account, and what was the directive purpose that brought it towards this current alignment as opposed to bringing it closer to Prairie Center Drive? Because I see on the periphery of Prairie Center Drive a library that could be an educational area that people would be able to want to go into, or maybe they don't want to, but trying to push education. We've got high density or mid to high density townhomes and on the condos on the periphery, and so tying in that with some of the other business areas using the TOD concept.
Sure, good question. So, well, we've got the one at Southwest Transit Station, that station there. So you're asking why didn't we consider moving this one further west to Prairie Center Drive?
Yeah, kind of utilizing the Prairie Center Drive. Now, I know there's topographical considerations and crossings, road crossing considerations that would be probably a factor that was in the scope of why it is that you ended up going through.
That is an issue there for sure. I mean, this would be elevated when we get that far west. But our team, when we looked at it, we thought the ideal location for it would be along Single Tree Lane. At Single Tree Lane and the future Main Street, because that would put it in the heart of the town center, and it would put it in a location where it would best serve the greatest amount of employees and households. When we looked at those numbers, the numbers were maximized in that location. It also puts it within the 5-minute walking ring from the shopping mall across Flying Cloud Drive, and we felt that was important as well to help serve mall users. So bringing it further west would get it outside of that ring. It's kind of a balancing act where these things end up. So our team promoted the Single Tree Lane location, but for other kinds of reasons, which Mike brought up, one of the things that the project engineering team looks at is how much time is lost then by bringing it further south like that. I think it was somewhere around 20 seconds, half a minute, something like that. But those little increments of time add up along a 15-mile corridor, and they're trying to maximize that time because they've got to compete with bus transit as well. So keeping it north on Eden Drive, got it closer to the center of the town center to serve, the town center better, getting it off a Technology Drive. But again, it saved some, precious seconds on the ride time. So, and then moving it further west would have gotten it really close to the Southwest Transit Station, and they try to space those out. They actually try to space them out ideally a mile apart. I can't recall what the distance is between this one and the Southwest Station, I think it's a little bit less than that. These are kind of close together. So, you know, really the goal here was to get it as close to the center of that town center as possible.
Yeah, it's pretty close that I can see. However, I see the rationale in bringing it south and east, including the potential future Presbyterian homes that, I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to want to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're not within the 10-minute ring, or the projected 10-minute improvement ring of
So
walkability.
you have the access and circulation plan in front of you? I don't have that in.
I do.
Yeah. Right, so you can see that 10-minute ring there.
Yeah, and that 10-minute ring is including Lake Idlewood, which no one's going to be living on Lake Idlewood.
Right.
So, I mean, if we can get it away from places that are, you know, if we can, I don't know what the engineering constraints would be in being able to relook that town center, but it comes to some of the other points that have been addressed is what is the direction that we want to go and in this town center area in this new comp guide plan update, and do we want to rethink this strategy? I mean, shaving, what, 20 seconds? I mean, come on. I mean, I would take 20 seconds over putting it in a more potential location that would serve greater people.
Yeah, I don't think there's any potential to move the station platform at this point. I think that's pretty much a set deal. Those discussions have been occurring for 14 months now, and there've been a lot of back and forth on that. And I think that location, Rod, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's probably fixed.
I think it is fixed. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that one of the reasons why the station is where it is and the alignment is where it is we took a look at the traffic impacts on Single Tree Lane.
Yeah, that had a lot to do with it.
All the
too.
traffic that goes there, and the main access to the mall, and the number of intersection points you'd have with driveways crossing where the rail line would go along Single Tree Lane.
Mhm.
It was also based upon all the meetings we had with business owners. So you have the council taking business owners' needs, traffic consideration, the time consideration for getting to downtown, trying to be able to implement the town center plan. I mean, we may not reach all of the areas that we'd like to reach with the light rail line, but the other thing we take into consideration is the future development potential, which was in our last guide plan update for another 15,000 jobs within the corridor, and another 8,000 housing units. So we're going to be serving future homeowners and future businesses with the line, as well as the existing developments that are there.
Well, I think every time I had the opportunity on the town center area, I voiced my concern, and I just thought I'd voice it again.
And I appreciate that, and that's part of the public record too, so we'll take that into account. I'm sure we'll be discussing it more. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question going back to the Mitchell Station, and I know that regarding that note that was added about whether or not the Mitchell Station will be dropped. At what is the timetable on that? At what point, will that be determined approximately? Do we know?
You know, that's not part of our work. It's part of the project office work. I don't know for sure when that, Mike, I don't know if you know whether or not.
I don't have an answer to that question. It's an unknown at this point. You know, one of the reasons we think that the Mitchell Station is a good idea is having the large park and ride there rather than having a large park and ride at Southwest Station. For those of you that travel Prairie Center Drive during the rush hour over at lunchtime, there's a lot of congestion that's there. And we would rather reserve what additional capacity we have left in the roads and intersections for redevelopment rather than the park and ride. So we think it's a good idea to separate it. When the project office says we're thinking about stopping at Southwest Station, that's when they're looking at trying to add additional parking spaces. And that brings a concern for us is how do you get all those additional trips in and out of there with the access system the way it is, and what other improvements could you do, if any, to Technology Drive and Prairie Center Drive to be able to make that work?
I think everyone thinks that the Mitchell site is a good idea. I think it just goes to funding. I mean, I think that's really the bottom line, is if they
Correct.
get into a crunch with funding,
Correct.
they'll start cutting it off at the end and see where it takes it from there.
And I think as well, it might tend to draw more people in from Chanhassen, Chaska.
I agree. I think
and more
I think
riders
it's a
in
good
that.
place to have the station, and I do worry too, as I know city staff does, about that flux of all those cars and people coming and going off from that one area, because you can only expand so much over there, and you get yourself into trouble. So
My limited knowledge is that money's going to be spent elsewhere on the line to deal with problems in other cities. And
yeah, that we don't even know about yet.
Well, I think they're pretty well known.
Yeah.
St. Louis Park and Minneapolis and some of those issues. And I think they're just going to have to spend that money there to deal with those issues and, look to see what gets cut, and the end of the line is a logical place, unfortunately for us.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns at all?
Good presentation.
All right, Jeff. Thank you very much for your time. We
Thanks for your
appreciate it.
time.
Thanks. Mr. Franz, anything else for planners reports tonight?
I have nothing else to add this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members report. I know we just spent some time on light rail. Do you have anything to add, Katie?
Our
to
next
that?
meeting is Thursday night at Hopkins.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else for members' reports? Okay. Any continuing business? Any new business? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.